The year is 2001 in Nigeria, a nation of more than 100 million people living in virtual communication darkness. At the time, only 700,000 fixed landlines and 22,000 cellular connections served this vast population. To get a line, Nigerians had to wait up to a decade and pay as much as $10,000. For most of them, modern communication was nothing more than a thing for the elite. But change was coming. The Nigerian government had just opened up the telecommunications market, transforming what had been a sterile field into a potential gold mine. The question was, which company would be bold enough to take the plunge? Founded as Mcell in 1994, MTN had already begun spreading its wings across neighboring African countries by the late 90s. But Nigeria was the ultimate prize. The company's first attempt to crack the market came in 1998, but the anticipated $100 million GSM license deal collapsed. Instead, the new government decided to hold a public auction. When 2001 rolled around, the stakes had risen dramatically. MTN entered a fierce bidding war and emerged victorious, paying an eye-watering $285 million for one of the first GSM licenses, the largest single investment in Nigeria's telecom history at that time. But it still wasn't a sure bet. Nobody could accurately predict how the market would respond. MTN had to make educated guesses about how many Nigerians would actually buy phones, how much they'd be willing to pay, and how quickly the company could recoup its massive investment. Every step forward was a leap into the unknown, and winning the license was just the first step. Next came the Herculean task of building an entire telecommunication network from scratch. In a country where roads were often impassable, reliable electricity was a luxury, and basic logistics could grind to a halt without warning. MTN had to import towers, diesel generators, and base stations, often facing massive delays and inflated costs due to bureaucratic bottlenecks and Nigeria's cash-heavy business environment. But MTN pressed on, investing heavily and working around the clock. By 2004, they had constructed 900 base stations, extended coverage to over 2,000 communities, and introduced energy-efficient solutions to cope with Nigeria's erratic power supply. They also launched training programs to develop skilled local labor, pouring millions into upskilling both Nigerians and expat workers. The early hustle paid off spectacularly. MTN became the first operator to launch commercial services just 7 months after securing their license, and by September, they already had more than 50,000 customers. This was an instant validation of Nigeria's pent-up demand for communication. Subscriber numbers then exploded. 2 million by 2004, then 8 million by 2005. MTN's first-mover advantage meant they quickly outpaced competitors and set industry trends. They introduced per-second billing in 2003, which made mobile services more affordable for millions and forced rivals to follow suit. By 2005, MTN commanded roughly 47% of Nigeria's mobile market share, cementing their position as the undisputed leader. But these early victories were planting the seeds of a future vulnerability. MTN's aggressive expansion meant constant heavy investment, often funded by massive loans with a growing portion denominated in US dollars. This strategy left the company dangerously exposed to Nigeria's economic volatility, inflation, and currency swings. Perhaps even more precarious was MTN's dependence on political goodwill and regulatory stability. Navigating Nigeria's unpredictable tax policies, securing permits, and responding to shifting government expectations created ongoing risks. The regulatory climate could change overnight, and soon a crisis would emerge from the shadows. As MTN rose to prominence, Nigeria faced a growing security crisis. Prepaid SIM cards could be purchased and activated on any street corner without identification, the perfect scenario for criminal activity. Kidnappers, fraudsters, and terrorist groups exploited this anonymity, using disposable burner phones to coordinate attacks and evade law enforcement. The telecommunications revolution that was transforming Nigeria's economy was inadvertently becoming a tool for those who threatened its security. By 2009, the Nigerian government had seen enough. Something had to change. The Nigerian Communications Commission announced a sweeping new policy: mandatory SIM card registration for all mobile phone users. The nationwide biometric registration exercise would formally start in 2011, giving operators and subscribers over a year to prepare for what would become one of Africa's largest identity verification programs. The policy was very ambitious in scope and noble in intent. Every SIM card in Nigeria, tens of millions of them, would need to be linked to verified biometric data and valid identification documents. And the policy codified the requirements but also penalties for non-compliance. $1,000 for every unregistered SIM active beyond the deadline. The stated objectives: assist security agencies in fighting crime, create a comprehensive national database of mobile users, and enable better know-your-customer functions across the telecommunications sector. What seemed straightforward in policy papers, however, would prove far more complex in practice. Nigeria's telecommunications market was and still is massive and chaotic. Millions of SIMs distributed through sprawling networks of agents and retailers across a country of over 180 million people at the time. The thing is, at the time, many Nigerians lacked formal identification documents, and the nation's identity infrastructure was still developing. Pre-registration by agents became rampant with fake or incomplete data, undermining the very purpose of the exercise. The initial registration window, originally set to end in January 2012, was extended multiple times as operators struggled with the sheer logistics of the mandate. Data quality issues plagued the process from the start. Wrong biometrics, invalid IDs, and duplicate records created a database that often defeated its own security objectives. For 3 years, Nigerian authorities conducted periodic audits and cleanup drives. Millions of improperly registered lines were identified across all major operators: MTN, Airtel, Globacom, and Etisalat. The Communications Commission regularly circulated lists of invalid registrations back to operators for correction or deactivation, revealing that data quality issues were industry-wide. But as Nigeria's security situation deteriorated, patience with non-compliance began to wear thin. By mid-2015, several factors converged to create a crisis. Nigeria was grappling with acute security and economic challenges, a wave of high-profile kidnappings, and the economy under severe strain from collapsing oil prices. In this tense environment, the Communications Commission launched its most aggressive enforcement action yet. In July and August 2015, the Commission issued specific orders to all operators: deactivate all SIMs with invalid or incomplete registration data within 7 days. Then, the NCC conducted compliance audits across all networks. While Airtel, Globacom, and Etisalat had largely complied with deactivation orders, limiting their exposure to penalties, one operator stood out for its non-compliance: MTN. The audit revealed that close to 5.2 million MTN lines remained improperly registered and active beyond the deadline, a massive breach of the 2011 regulations. What happened next would reshape not just MTN's future, but perceptions of regulatory risk across the entire continent. After a solid decade of dominance, on October 2015, MTN Group, Africa's largest telecommunication operator, was slapped with a colossal penalty: a $5.2 billion fine from Nigeria's telecommunications regulator for failing to disconnect more than 5 million unregistered SIM cards. To this day, this is the biggest fine ever issued to any company in global telecom history. The fine represented nearly a quarter of Nigeria's entire annual budget and roughly 30% of MTN Group's market value. The penalty of $1,000 per unregistered line now seemed to defy all sense of proportion. The market's reaction was brutal. MTN's share price plummeted by as much as 25%. Trading on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange was temporarily halted as panic spread. MTN Group CEO, the Nigeria CEO, and other executives resigned under the crushing pressure. Analysts and investors found themselves asking the unthinkable: could a single penalty strip away years of profit and threaten MTN's very survival? Officially, the fine was about security. With oil prices collapsing, the Nigerian government desperately needed a budget relief, and some observers saw the massive fine as a convenient way to fill state coffers at the expense of a foreign company. Diplomatic relations between Nigeria and South Africa began to wear out. The sheer size of the fine was described as preposterous, even by Nigeria's own press, suggesting this was as much about sending a political message as enforcing compliance. Foreign companies in Nigeria, no matter how big or established, were subject to the state's will. If Nigeria didn't back down, MTN could face defaulting on its debt. And when it rains, it pours. In 2018, Nigeria's central bank delivered another devastating blow to MTN. Accusing the company of improper repatriation of profits, the bank asked for the return of $8.1 billion in dividends. The Attorney General piled on, claiming an additional $2 billion in taxes owed. Suddenly, MTN was staring at a combined $10.1 billion bill, well over half its market value at the time. The problem now extended beyond Nigeria. The South African Reserve Bank voiced serious concern that paying such settlements could cripple MTN, potentially creating systemic risk for South African banks. MTN's shareholders openly wondered whether Nigeria had simply become too dangerous for long-term investment. The crisis extended far beyond the penalties headlines. Regulatory authorities suspended approval for new tariffs and promotions, hampering the company's ability to compete effectively. MTN started to face a baffling maze of taxes and levies from different government tiers, some of which seemed completely arbitrary and punitive. So logically, network investment slowed dramatically as the board scrambled to shore up finances. Vandalism and theft of infrastructure rose sharply. Nigeria's broader macroeconomic problems piled pressure on profitability. MTN's Nigerian unit, which had once generated the lion's share of the group's profits, was now reporting massive foreign exchange losses and was forced to suspend dividend payments. Would Africa's biggest telecom company survive this unprecedented assault, or would regulatory and economic chaos swallow one of the continent's most prominent corporate giants? MTN wasn't ready to fold yet. The company embarked on the most remarkable corporate turnarounds in African business history. The company's survival began with masterful negotiation. Aliko, stepping in as interim executive chairman, led a diplomatic offensive that would make seasoned ambassadors proud. MTN enlisted heavyweight negotiator Eric Holder, a former U.S. Attorney General, to sit down with Nigerian officials. The strategy was brilliant and simple. Admit mistakes, show good faith, and negotiate from a position of humility rather than defiance. MTN made an initial good faith payment of $250 million, while simultaneously dropping its lawsuit against the regulator, a gesture that signaled genuine commitment to finding a solution. After months of shuttle diplomacy and high-stakes negotiations, the impossible happened. The fine was slashed from $5.2 billion to $1.7 billion, payable over 3 years. The existential threat had been transformed into a manageable challenge. This agreement brought a fundamental change in how MTN operates in Nigeria. The company shifted from adversarial stance to collaborative partnerships, working directly with ministries on tax issues, infrastructure development, and digital inclusion initiatives. MTN dramatically expanded its corporate social responsibility footprint, and through its foundation it invested heavily in education. But perhaps most significantly, MTN localized its leadership by appointing experienced Nigerian executives. By 2024, an impressive 99% of MTN Nigeria's permanent employees are Nigerian citizens, and approximately 93% of the executive management team. While rebuilding trust and relationships, MTN was simultaneously executing a radical business model transformation. The era of voice-dominated revenue was ending, and the company bet big on mobile money, fintech services, and data expansion. It spun off its fintech division and acquired full ownership of digital banking platforms, positioning itself at the center of Nigeria's digital financial revolution. The economic mechanics of the business shifted fundamentally. Learning from past supply chain vulnerabilities, MTN dramatically increased its reliance on local suppliers. By 2024, nearly 60% of procurement spending went to Nigerian suppliers, empowering thousands of small and medium enterprises. The ultimate proof of MTN's successful comeback came in 2019, when the company listed shares on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, a powerful symbol of renewed stability and long-term commitment to the Nigerian economy. Local investors took significant stakes in the business, deepening MTN's integration into the Nigerian economic fabric and signaling a future built on genuine shared values. MTN's story in Nigeria became a masterclass on how to operate successfully in high-growth, high-risk emerging markets.